Hey there, welcome back. Great to see you again for Law number 12, See-Through Projection. People often accuse others of what they fear in themselves. If you haven't watched the previous episodes yet, please check the description. Otherwise, you will miss some important steps in this book. Every human being carries shadows, parts of themselves too uncomfortable, shameful, or threatening to admit. But instead of facing these shadows, people cast them outward, accusing others of the very flaws they secretly fear in themselves. This is projection, the mind's way of escaping responsibility by shifting inner conflict onto the world around us. It's why the dishonest man swears everyone else is a liar. It's why the insecure boss constantly calls his team incompetent. It's why the unfaithful partner becomes obsessed with jealousy. Projection is not just a psychological quirk. It is a lens that distorts reality, poisons relationships, and exposes people more than they realize. What people attack in others often reveals their deepest weaknesses. And if you learn to see through this, you gain an extraordinary advantage. You can predict behaviors before they happen, strip away illusions, and protect yourself from manipulations that blind everyone else. Recognize when projection is at play, both in others and within yourself. By doing so, you unlock a higher form of clarity, one where people reveal their fears without knowing it, and where your own self-awareness shields you from repeating their mistakes. Those who master projection can see the unseen. They no longer get trapped in the illusions others live in. They navigate life with sharper vision, while everyone else wrestles with ghosts of their own making. Every human being carries shadows. These shadows are not monsters lurking in the dark, but unspoken fears, secret desires, insecurities, and unacknowledged flaws. Because they are painful to admit, the mind protects itself with one of the oldest tricks in the psychological playbook. It projects. Instead of owning the weakness, we paint it onto someone else. It is far easier to condemn another person than to confront the truth about ourselves. Thus, the liar becomes obsessed with uncovering lies in others. The unfaithful lover becomes gripped by jealousy. The leader who doubts his own competence accuses everyone around him of being incapable. This is projection, one of the most common yet invisible forces shaping human interaction. You have seen it countless times. The colleague who nitpicks your mistakes because she secretly fears her own irrelevance. The friend who accuses you of being selfish when in reality he is the one who rarely sacrifices. Or the family member who constantly warns you not to trust people because he himself has a history of betrayal. In every case, projection operates like a mirror turned outward, reflecting inner shadows onto the world so the person never has to face them directly. But here lies the danger. Projection does not just distort reality for the one doing it. It warps the entire field of human relationships. It poisons trust, creates needless conflict, and blinds everyone involved to the truth. Worse still, projection makes people vulnerable without them realizing it. When someone reveals their projections, they are also revealing their weaknesses, their fears, and the exact places where they can be manipulated. If you do not learn to see through projection, you risk falling into their illusions, fighting battles that are not yours, defending yourself against ghosts that were never real, and missing the truth of what is actually happening. To master this law is to pierce through the fog of human deception. Once you see projection clearly, the world opens up in a new way. People begin to reveal their character without speaking. Their accusations become confessions. Their anger becomes a roadmap to their insecurities. Their constant suspicion becomes a spotlight on their own guilt. When you see through projection, you stop being deceived by appearances. You learn to read what others cannot hide. And, just as importantly, you learn to spot the same patterns in yourself, freeing you from the blindness that enslaves most of humanity. Projection, at its core, is not evil. It is a survival instinct, a defense mechanism. But when left unchecked, it traps people in illusions of their own making. The wise, however, use projection as a window. Instead of reacting to it, they study it. They look at the jealous lover and see fear of abandonment. They watch the paranoid leader and see crippling self-doubt. They listen to the gossip and recognize loneliness disguised as venom. Each projection is a breadcrumb trail leading back to the projector's soul. And when you know how to follow that trail, you hold a kind of power that others cannot match, the power of clarity in a world drowning in shadows. Remember this, the words people hurl at others are often the clearest confessions of who they really are. Projection is one of the mind's most cunning tricks because it disguises weakness as vision. Sigmund Freud, who first described the mechanism in psychoanalysis, explained that projection occurs when a person disowns an inner impulse or fear and attributes it to someone else. If the mind cannot tolerate an uncomfortable truth, such as envy, aggression, or guilt, it seeks relief by pushing it outward. Carl Jung took this further, observing that what we refuse to acknowledge within ourselves often shows up as the very qualities we dislike or condemn in others. He called this the shadow, the rejected part of the self that keeps demanding attention, even if in distorted form. Modern psychology confirms what these early thinkers observed. Projection is not rare or pathological. It is everyday. Every one of us does it, often without realizing. It slips into our judgments, our conversations, and even our closest relationships. Consider how projection shapes love. A man insecure about his own loyalty accuses his partner of being unfaithful, checking her phone and watching her every move. His suspicion is not evidence of her betrayal, but of his own unresolved impulses. Or look at the workplace. A manager who fears being incompetent scrutinizes every detail of his employees' work, never satisfied, always critical. The more he projects, the more his team loses trust, and the very insecurity he was trying to hide begins to expose itself. Projection is like a boomerang. The more forcefully it is thrown at others, the more accurately it circles back to the thrower. At its root, projection is about survival. The psyche believes it is protecting itself. To admit envy or dishonesty or weakness feels dangerous to the ego, so the mind offloads it. By accusing someone else, the projector avoids the sting of shame. Yet the cost is high because projection blinds them to the truth of themselves. Worse still, it binds them to repetitive cycles of conflict. A jealous lover drives away partners, reinforcing abandonment fears. A distrustful leader alienates allies, proving his paranoia right. The pattern feeds itself endlessly until it is seen for what it is. But the real power of understanding projection is not simply in naming it, it is in reading it. When someone is consumed by suspicion, they are not telling you the truth about you, they are telling you the truth about themselves. When someone insists that you are selfish, look carefully at their own behavior. When someone constantly warns of betrayal, study their own history. Projection is a confession, delivered in disguise. Once you learn to decode it, you gain an advantage that few possess. The ability to see beneath the words, to the hidden fears and motives driving them. Even more fascinating is how projection operates not just in individuals, but in groups and nations. Entire societies have projected their own violence onto enemies, scapegoats, or outsiders. History is filled with examples where persecution was less about the accused and more about the fears of the accusers. Witch hunts in Europe revealed society's terror of female power and independence. Political purges have often revealed leaders' fear of losing control. When you examine these through the lens of projection, the patterns become strikingly clear. The louder the accusation, the deeper the insecurity within. Psychology also shows that projection is contagious. Just as emotions can spread in groups, projections can ripple outward. One person accuses, others adopt the suspicion, and soon a community is swept into paranoia. Families can live for generations under the weight of projected fears, children inheriting the suspicions of parents, never realizing they are defending against ghosts. The tragedy is that most people never stop to question whether the accusation is true. They react, defend, retaliate, and in doing so, they become trapped in someone else's unacknowledged shadow. The wise learn a different path. Instead of reacting to projection, they observe it with detachment. They recognize that when someone lashes out, it is not always about them. They see projection for what it is, an unfiltered glimpse into another's inner world. This perspective brings calm, clarity, and even compassion. For if projection is a defense, then behind it is pain. To see projection clearly is to see both the weakness and the wound. But clarity does not mean passivity. The master of human nature uses projection as intelligence. It tells you where someone is vulnerable, where they can be trusted, and where they will betray. In power dynamics, this knowledge is priceless. Projection is not just a personal flaw, but a recurring theme in history and philosophy. From ancient times, leaders, thinkers, and entire cultures have both fallen victim to it and mastered the art of exposing it. Consider how the Roman Republic, in its decline, became obsessed with accusations of treason. Senators pointed fingers at one another, each warning of plots and conspiracies. Yet beneath these claims was their own hunger for power and fear of losing influence. The louder the accusations, the more fragile the accuser's position truly was. The Republic collapsed not simply because of external threats, but because its leaders projected their insecurities outward until paranoia corroded trust. The lesson is clear. When a society loses the ability to recognize projection, suspicion replaces reason and institutions unravel. Philosophy, too, has long grappled with this hidden law of human behavior. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius above all, warned against being carried away by the opinions and accusations of others. If someone has done wrong, Marcus wrote in his Meditations, the harm is theirs, not yours. This insight anticipated the very essence of projection. The harm lies not in the accusation, but in the accuser's inability to govern himself. To master oneself, therefore, is not only to avoid projecting, but to see clearly when others are doing so. In Eastern traditions, the idea appears differently but with equal depth. In Buddhism, one's anger toward others is seen as a reflection of inner suffering. To attack another is to reveal where one is unhealed. The practice of mindfulness and compassion is, in this sense, a weapon against projection, because it demands the courage to see within rather than strike outward. History provides endless examples where projection has dictated the fate of leaders. During the French Revolution, Maximilien Robespierre rose as a defender of virtue, denouncing corruption at every turn. Yet his relentless purges revealed not simply the corruption of others, but his own mounting paranoia and fear of betrayal. His downfall came not because his accusations were always false, but because they were fueled by his inner terror, projected upon all who surrounded him. The guillotine he turned outward eventually found him, an embodiment of the truth that projections often create the very enemies they imagine. Contrast this with Abraham Lincoln during the American Civil War. Constantly accused, mocked, and slandered, Lincoln responded not with paranoia, but with remarkable calm. He saw beyond the projections of rivals and focused instead on the larger purpose of unity. His ability to distinguish between others' fears and his own judgment gave him resilience. Where Robespierre collapsed under projection, Lincoln rose above it by refusing to let it define his decisions. Cultural traditions have also understood projection, even if they did not use the term. In Japanese aesthetics, the concept of ma, the space between words, actions, or sounds, teaches that silence often carries more truth than speech. In societies where harmony is prized, accusations and loud judgments are often seen as revealing more about the speaker than the target. In this way, projection is silently acknowledged. What you choose to say about others exposes who you are more than who they are. Similarly, in myths across the world, the notion of seeing the enemy within recurs. In certain West African traditions, the great silence before creation was seen as a state of purity. The moment speech entered, conflict followed, because words often carried hidden fears. This mirrors the dynamic of projection. Once unacknowledged inner turmoil is voiced, it begins shaping the outer world. Philosophically, projection forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that we are often blind to ourselves. It is easier to see faults in others than in the mirror. Religious traditions, while diverse, converge on this insight. Jesus warned his followers to first remove the plank from your own eye before pointing out the speck in another's. This is projection, captured in metaphorical clarity. The flaws we condemn most harshly in others are usually the ones we carry most heavily ourselves. Hindu philosophy echoes this through the law of karma. What one sends outward returns. If you accuse others without self-examination, you entrap yourself in cycles of conflict, for the energy of your projections will come back as consequences. What history, philosophy, and religion all reveal is that projection is not random, it is predictable. Those who understand it can anticipate behavior. The insecure ruler will accuse others of disloyalty. The jealous partner will accuse the innocent of betrayal. The corrupt official will thunder most loudly about integrity. To see through projection is therefore to see the script of the future. Just as a chess master predicts moves not by guessing but by reading the position on the board, so too can one predict human actions by listening closely to what they accuse others of. This transforms projection from a hidden weakness into a tool of foresight. The practical wisdom here is that projection exposes motives without the speaker realizing it. History punishes those who take accusations at face value and rewards those who decode the hidden confession behind them. Whether in politics, personal life, or cultural conflict, the key is to train the eye not to be blinded by noise but sharpened by it. Projection is the mirror people hold up while insisting it reflects someone else. The master of human nature knows to look directly into it, not away. In the realm of business and leadership, projection often operates silently, yet it can decide the fate of negotiations and partnerships. Imagine a business leader who is deeply insecure about his own competence. Instead of confronting that fear, he projects it outward, labeling his team as unreliable or his partners as incompetent. This not only poisons trust, but also blinds him to his own shortcomings, leaving the organization weakened from within. Conversely, a skilled negotiator who can see through projection gains immense leverage. When a counterpart accuses him of being greedy or aggressive without cause, he recognizes it as a confession. The other side fears their own selfishness being exposed. Instead of reacting defensively, he studies the outburst, adjusts his tone to calm authority, and lets the projector unravel their own mask. In such moments, clarity becomes the sharpest weapon, and the ability to remain centered transforms projection into a map of the opponent's insecurities. In relationships, projection can be both the glue and the poison. Jealousy, for instance, is one of the clearest forms of projection. A partner who secretly struggles with their own temptations may accuse the other of infidelity, not because there is evidence, but because their guilt demands an outlet. The tragedy is that such projection, if unchecked, can create the very betrayal it fears. Constant suspicion erodes trust, and the accused may eventually give in to the role forced upon them. In such moments, clarity becomes the sharpest weapon, and the ability to remain centered transforms projection into a map of the opponent's insecurities. In relationships, projection can be both the glue and the poison. Jealousy, for instance, is one of the clearest forms of projection. A partner who secretly struggles with their own temptations may accuse the other of infidelity, not because there is evidence, but because their guilt demands an outlet. The tragedy is that such projection, if unchecked, can create the very betrayal it fears. Constant suspicion erodes trust, and the accused may eventually give in to the role forced upon them. But awareness transforms this dynamic. A lover who understands projection can respond not with anger but with curiosity, asking, "Why do you feel this way?" and drawing attention back to the real wound beneath the accusation. To master this law in love is to create a relationship built not on illusions but on the courage to face shadows together. Friendship, too, is not immune. There are moments when a friend projects their failures onto you, calling you unreliable when it is their own absence that defines the pattern, or accusing you of selfishness when they secretly resent how much they depend on you. Yet the deepest friendships survive precisely because they transcend projection. These are the bonds forged in sacrifice, in the unspoken vow of "I got your back no matter what." Such loyalty is powerful because it cuts through projection with lived proof. Words can deceive, but actions over time reveal the truth. The friend who shows up in crisis, who sacrifices sleep, comfort, or resources, disproves projection by embodying reliability. To build these bonds, one must not only see through projection, but also respond to it with consistency and strength, transforming suspicion into unshakable trust. Projection, however, is not only a personal flaw, it is also a tool of manipulation. History is filled with leaders, cult figures, and politicians who weaponized projection to control masses. They painted their opponents as corrupt, dangerous, or immoral, accusations that often revealed more about their own desires than any truth about the opposition. Yet, by projecting outward, they distracted followers from questioning them. A cult leader who fears his own doubts accuses followers of lacking faith, thereby tightening his grip. A ruler who secretly lusts for power accuses enemies of tyranny, casting himself as a savior while embodying the very thing he condemns. This is the dark side of projection. When wielded consciously, it becomes a psychological weapon. To protect oneself, one must learn to dissect accusations not at face value but at root value, asking, what does this reveal about the speaker? In this way, projection becomes less of a fog and more of a spotlight that exposes hidden motives. On a personal level, projection is also a mirror for growth. When someone accuses you unfairly, it is tempting to dismiss it outright. But the wise pause and examine. Is there even a grain of truth? Perhaps the projection is exaggerated, but it may still reveal a blind spot worth exploring. If a colleague calls you arrogant, maybe their words are more about their own insecurity, but still it is worth asking, do I sometimes come across as dismissive? And this way, projection becomes not an insult but a teacher. Mastering this mindset transforms every accusation into data, some false, some distorted, but all worth studying. Over time, this practice builds resilience, humility, and a clearer sense of self. The ultimate mastery of projection lies in learning to read it as both a defense mechanism and an unintentional confession. In business, it grants leverage. In love, it preserves trust. In friendship, it deepens loyalty. In politics and manipulation, it protects you from deception. And in self-development, it becomes a mirror that sharpens awareness. The world is filled with people carrying shadows they cannot face. They will accuse, attack, and project because it is easier than self-reflection. But once you learn to see through projection, their illusions lose power over you. You stop fighting ghosts and start navigating reality with precision. In a world of masks and mirrors, the ability to read projection makes you the rare person who sees not the shadows others cast, but the truth they cannot hide. In the end, projection is one of the most deceptive forces in human nature because it cloaks weakness as accusation and fear as judgment. To master this law is to step outside the fog of other people's illusions and enter the realm of clarity, where every word and gesture becomes a clue rather than a distraction. The great strategist does not take accusations at face value, for he knows that people reveal more about themselves when they speak of others. The insecure man will call others arrogant. The dishonest woman will brand others untrustworthy. The power-hungry leader will accuse rivals of tyranny. To the untrained eye, these accusations provoke defensiveness. But to the one who sees through projection, they are confessions in disguise. When you refuse to react blindly, you strip projection of its power and instead turn it into information. This makes you unshakable, while others remain enslaved to shadows they do not understand. The lesson runs deeper than defense alone. Projection is not simply something to be resisted, it is something that can be redirected. When you understand that people will often hand you a map to their fears, insecurities, and desires, you can navigate human interaction with surgical precision. The angry client who calls you greedy is telling you they are obsessed with value. Answer by over-delivering on fairness, and they are disarmed. The partner who accuses you of indifference is showing you that recognition is their deepest hunger. Meet that hunger, and loyalty is secured. Even the jealous lover who projects temptation onto you is confessing their own fear of inadequacy. Your response, if it is calm and reassuring, can heal rather than fracture. Thus, mastery of projection is not only about defending yourself, but about leveraging human confession for deeper trust, greater influence, and sharper power. History and psychology converge on this point. Those who react to projection with anger become trapped, while those who read it as data become untouchable. The Stoics knew this, teaching that insult is only injury if you allow it inside. Modern psychology confirms it, showing that projection is the unconscious attempt to rid oneself of inner tension by placing it onto others. What looks like attack is often escape, and when you grasp this, you cease being provoked. Instead, you become the calm observer who lets others reveal themselves fully while you remain a closed book. In this silence, in this refusal to mirror their illusions, lies immense power. The tactical maxim is clear. See through projection. Do not fight it. Let accusations reveal the accuser. Let suspicions uncover their fears. Let hostility map their wounds. The more they project, the clearer their portrait becomes, until they stand naked in their own reflection while you stand untouched. In the theater of human interaction, projection is both the mask and the mirror. The wise learn to look past the mask and read the mirror. For those who master this law, every encounter becomes an opportunity to decode truth from distortion, and every relationship becomes a chessboard where the projected pieces move predictably, while you alone hold the real power. All right, that's a wrap for Part 12. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I appreciate your time and energy. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and keeps the content coming your way. And be sure to check out Part 13, where we dive into Plant the Idea, Don't Push It. Until then, take care and keep growing. See you in the next one.